All right there, everyone. The Democrats are in a blind panic over Howard Schultz's White House run, saying that it will guarantee the re-election of Donald Trump. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. But before we do, don't forget, we have our brand new Yellow Vest mugs and shirts available for you. I just got mine in the mail the other day, and it's a great reminder of the massive uprising going on in France and indeed throughout the world, as we've detailed in other videos. So if you want to support this channel and show your solidarity with the Yellow Vest uprisers, then click on the link below and get your mug and t-shirts today. All right, so I'm sure many of you know by now that we here in the United States gear up for presidential elections literally 2 years before they happen. It's frankly crazy, but the Democrats are all lining up to get their party's nomination. They tend to be representatives of the far left wing, thus far at least. Cory Spartacus Booker just announced he's running. We've had his comrade Kamala Harris announce her bid. Elizabeth Warren is still toying with the idea. But to the shock of Democrats everywhere, Howard Schultz, who's a Democrat and the CEO of Starbucks, he's announced that he's going to run, but instead of seeking the nomination for the Democratic Party, he said he's going to launch a third party bid, an independent candidacy for the presidency. Now, what's interesting here is that Schultz argues that he represents more the center left, which he sees as being abandoned by the Democratic Party by virtue of its takeover by the radical left. Just look at their candidates right now. And by the way, this is the kind of left-wing radicalism that President Trump has been exploiting of late. Did you see his tweet the other day? It was hilarious. He nailed it. He said that Democrats are becoming the party of late-term abortion, high taxes, open borders, and crime. Okay, that's called mic drop. The Democrats are the party of late-term abortion, high taxes, open borders, and crime. Then Ben Shapiro said that that's really basically all Trump should be saying for the next 2 years. Remember, the Democrats are in huge political trouble right now with their radical abortion push. The Virginia governor went so far as to actually endorse what's being called after-birth abortion, actually killing the child after it's been born alive. Only about 15% of Americans believe in abortion, like no matter what or when. A solid 80% of Americans are opposed to abortion in the third trimester. And I'm sure about 98% would be opposed to a child being killed who's living outside of the womb. I don't know of a single other political issue that can muster that kind of majority. So Trump is pounding on the Democrats, and rightly so. And I'm very happy to say, and we talked about it in one of our latest videos, that abortion is fast becoming a single most important issue of unity for Republicans, pro-life position, that is. So Schultz is positioning himself as a centrist who basically is saying a pox on both parties. I want to start afresh. I want to be independent of any of the lobbyists and the pressures that come from either the Democrats or the Republicans. He's not a Republican, so it doesn't matter. Now, of course, the problem for the Democrats here is that, number one, Schultz is seen as a Seattle lib, a moderate lib, but a lib nonetheless. And so he's inevitably going to steal votes from whoever the Democratic candidate ends up being. On the other side, because there would be 3 candidates or 3 major candidates in the race, all Trump would need is about 40% of the vote to win. Remember, Bill Clinton back in 1992, he won his first presidential term with only 43% of the vote. Ross Perot was the spoiler in that one. He siphoned away a significant vote share from George Bush Sr. So needless to say, the Democrats are absolutely panicked right now. Hosts on the ultra-liberal left-wing MSNBC are freaking out. They're even starting to come out and are already trying to politically destroy him. The New York Times rabid ultra-liberal columnist Paul Krugman is actually claiming that Schultz is a plutocrat who's actively trying to undermine the resistance to President Trump. Liberals at the New York Times Magazine are trying to undermine. They're actually trying to undermine his biography. Schultz portrays himself as someone who embodies the American dream, rising out of relative poverty and downtrodden Brooklyn. You would think that we would celebrate that, right? Nope. Not leftists. They're doing everything they can to poke holes in his story and spread cynicism that he's a self-made man and all that. So the liberal Democrats are just revealing what they really are, right? Like Christine Ford during the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court hearings. They'll use you for their own purposes, and then when they're done, they'll spit you out. They'll completely forget about you. Hillary's learning that too, interestingly enough, isn't she? Now, a couple of things here, some interesting stuff here. What's interesting about Schultz's third party run is that it's part of a larger pattern of outside parties gaining inordinate attention in our current political scenes. The scholars Eatwell and Goodwin, in their definitive study on the rise of nationalist populism in Europe and the United States, cataloged a wealth of data that shows that more and more populations are completely losing confidence in the centrist parties that represent the globalist world order. Here's what the data is showing. Recent polling, particularly in Europe, paints a very stark picture for globalism's traditional centrist parties. When asked whether they thought traditional parties and politicians don't care about me and my concerns, the percentage of Europeans who agreed with that statement ranged from a low of 44% in Sweden to 61% in Poland, and if you can believe it, as high as 78% in France. Yellow vest uprising, anybody? And so this goes a long way to explaining some of the voting data that we have from Germany and Britain. In Germany, the main sources for votes for the Nationalist Populist Alternative for Germany, the AfD, in their first time running for election and getting into parliament with 13% of the vote in 2017. Their main sources for votes were those who did not vote in the previous national election. They felt like none of the parties represented them. It was the exact same thing in Brexit. Around 2 million Brits who voted for the referendum had not voted in the previous year's general election. Again, because they didn't see a single politician or party representing or addressing their concerns. Now, here in the United States, voter affiliation with independent or non-affiliate parties has been growing steadily for years now. From 2008 to 2016, independent voter enrollment surged by nearly 30%, while the two mainstream parties grew by just a couple of percentage points. In fact, the total number of Americans who identify themselves as independents is larger than those who identify themselves as either Republican or Democrat. According to the most recent Gallup poll, 42% of Americans identify themselves as independent, as opposed to 29% who identify themselves as Democrats and 27% who identify as Republicans. So the most important point here is that the massive paradigm shift that we're seeing away from a globalist world order to a more nationalist populist world order is exemplifying a very noticeable de-alignment or breakdown of the traditional bonds that used to exist between traditional political parties and their constituents. And this breakdown in the bonds that voters have had with traditional parties is making it easier for new political challengers to rise up and take the nation in a new direction. We have to remember, and we've talked about this before, Donald Trump was a third-party candidate who won a major party primary. Donald Trump was a third-party candidate who won the Republican nomination. Again, there's been no one quite like him. We're increasingly in the era of third-party candidates and non-traditional parties. Now, leftists like Schultz are going to have a harder time at this, and this is because they largely limit both the problems and solutions politically that we're facing here to mere economic issues. Again, Eatwell and Goodwin point this out in their book, why the populist right is seeing such an advantage here. And that's because the nationalist populist right, they don't just talk economics, they talk border security, cultural security, which the data shows is becoming extremely concerning among a majority of populations. And what we found, of course, is that leftist populists tend to focus only on economic issues and ignore almost entirely border security and cultural security. Now, that is changing, interestingly enough. We're seeing leftist parties like Die Linke in Germany adopt a very strong border security platform, but at this point, they tend to be the exception to the rule. So all this is to say that the Democrats really had better get used to this. I think Schultz promises to be just the beginning of a third-party candidacy on the left. Again, notice in the last election, 2016, who were the two most popular candidates? They were two outsiders, two third-party candidates running for their respective nominations in mainstream parties. Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, he's not even a Democrat, and Donald Trump, who represented a nationalist populist traditionalism that was rather foreign to mainstream establishment Republicans. Only Trump won the candidacy and then went on to win the presidency. The Republicans already have their third-party candidate attraction built in. The Democrats are doing everything they can to keep the status quo. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the like. And so according to the data that we now have, the Democrats, are particularly vulnerable to a third-party challenger, which of course is making them not only vulnerable to losing big in 2020, but also makes them absolutely miserable in the process. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our new online merchandise selection where you can get gear and apparel celebrating all things nationalist, populist. And if you would, please click on our Patreon, subscribe to our PayPal links below, and become a supporter of this channel. As you know, we are periodically demonetized by YouTube, and we can really use your help so we can continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. God bless.